Twitter war with CNN.
Oh, no, Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Que Sepas. We're joined today by two incredible guests. My name is Danny Hernandez. I am the Community Outreach and Engagement Coordinator with All in Education. And this program is a project of All in Education. A little bit about Que Sepas. Que Sepas online video series is a digital space created to advance equitable ideas and further productive dialogue. Through partnerships and public engagements, this series discusses critical questions, assesses data, and engages Latino community in issues that matter and in topics that address anticipated barriers to opportunity and justice. These conversations will be thought-provoking, informative, and real. But more importantly, they'll be developed and led by Latino voices and perspectives as a way to establish our own narrative, amplify our values, and prioritize equity, justice, and opportunity for all Latinx families in Arizona. So I want to start out by introducing our guests. First, we have Gabriela Caceres Kelly. Hey, Gabriela.
Hi.
So you mind telling us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and some of your background?
Sure thing. Skuktash, first of all, good day. Anya Nyapchugit Gabriela Cáceres Kelly, Bismo Chukup Amjut. So good day. My name is Gabriela Cáceres Kelly. I'm from the communities of Bismo and Kup, which are located on the Thanatham Nation, right here in beautiful, gorgeous Pima County. And I am a candidate. I'm running for a Pima County Recorder. And I first got involved in this work simply because I noticed that there was a need for increased information and education. It doesn't really help people if they have the right to vote, if they don't know how to access their rights. And so I've been a big voting champion for a very long time, and really excited to just share information and nerd out about voting.
Love it, love it, love it. Next, we have Mr. Adrian Fontes. Mr. Fontes, mind introducing yourself?
Absolutely. And Danny, thank you so much for having me. My name is Adrian Fontes. I'm the Maricopa County Recorder. I'm the incumbent. I'm running for re-election here in the second largest voting jurisdiction in the United States of Arizona. I think we compete with Pima County for its beauty, but not for size, because we got you guys beat on that part. I'm actually an Arizona native. I was born and raised down in Nogales, not too far from Gabriela's home, down in Santa Cruz County. I'm a graduate of Arizona State University and the University of Denver College of Law, and an alum of the United States Marine Corps.
Yeah,
Not a veteran, but it's an education of its own. And I am also passionate about helping folks understand the time and place and manner of their elections so that they can use their voice to determine what direction they want to try to nudge this country into and help lead their own communities.
So thank you both. Again, thank you both for being here. I as a veteran of the Marine Corps myself, I can, also echo that, yes, an education.
Oh, I didn't know that. Semper Fi.
Really, Semper Fi. Birthday's coming up, so I'll reach back out. Yeah. Now, so to jump right in about some of the issues, there's so much when it comes to this election, specifically the 2020 election. I do want to take a step back before jumping into some of those questions and hear about the civic engagement, the importance of civic engagement, and why you have gone into this type of work. So, Mr. Fontes, if you don't mind, if we start with you this time, why this type of work? Why Maricopa County Recorder? Why was that your calling?
Well, it wasn't actually my calling. I got angry and jumped in. I saw in March of 2016, as many people remember, the 4 and 5 hour long lines and people just being disenfranchised. I mean, it was voter suppression in action in front of us in our neighborhoods up here in the Phoenix area. And it turned my stomach enough that I turned my life around and jumped into the race. When I got here, I found an institution that had essentially ignored the idea of civic outreach and civic engagement. It had ignored communicating clearly and freely with the public. And what that means is that traditionally underserved communities in Maricopa County were really being underserved, right? If nobody's being spoken to, then a lot of people are being ignored. And so we created a community relations team, one team member for each of the supervisory districts to start with, to just reach out and try to figure out what to do. That morphed over those 4 years into a roundtable project that focused on 6 specific groups of individuals. And we can get more into the details of that later, but getting into it, and what got me into it was realizing after I'd been in office for a very short time that the linchpin to our democracy, and that is the one office that really connected the democratic process to the people, was silent when it came to talking about it. And so we needed to change that, and we've done that pretty effectively, I think, here in Maricopa County.
Thank you. Gabriella, same question.
Yeah, I first started getting involved simply because I used to work at a tribal community college, and we thought that we could register folks in like 2 afternoons in the student lounge, and we set up shop, and then we found so many issues with voter registration that were impacting tribal communities, rural tribal members. College students were feeling discouraged from voting. We were running into so many issues, and I was constantly on the recorder's website, and I was calling them and emailing them back and forth and trying to find out information, not only there but statewide and countrywide actually. So I started uh, learning about the different county recorders and some of the different resources that they had, Pinal, and the differences with Maricopa. And I was checking out your website and really noticing the differences there. And in other states, when we were seeing, in some states, in order to get an early ballot mailed to you, you have to fax them, and you cannot email. And we were thinking of like college students, out of state college students, who were really struggling to figure out where they needed to register to vote, and it wasn't as easy as simply saying get out there and vote. And so the more and more that I started learning about elections processes, and started reading the manuals, I started reading just every policy that I could get my hands on, and um, being in communication with the different recorders offices, I realized that I wanted to make this my living. I wanted to work in one of these offices, and I was never thinking, oh, I need to head this office. I just wanted to work there, and then I started encountering barriers to working there, that it was really frustrating. And so when I saw that there was an opportunity, our recorder is, after 28 years of wonderful service, she is retiring, FN Rodriguez, and so I'm running for her open seat. And I feel it is a sense of duty for me to at least try, and that's how I got involved, and that's how I'm so excited for this. It was just connecting everyday people with that information.
And the incredible answers, and I'm very much this last phrase you used, sense of duty. Taking that and kind of expanding on that a little bit. Where does sense of duty come from? Is it your parents? Was it your family? Maybe a teacher? Like where are some of your earliest memories when it comes to your civic engagement and the importance of it?
For me, growing up in a Native community, and I think this is really common for a lot of people in the communities that we're accustomed to. Everybody pitches in, everybody participates, and you help everybody. You help your neighbors, you help your family. It's all of us together. And so I definitely have that sense of responsibility. If I have information that I'm privy to share that with others. I'm an educator by profession. I've been an educator for about 14 years, and it is always, it's not, catching a fish for somebody, it's teaching someone how to fish. And, we're doing that with voting. It's teaching people how to utilize the tools that we have at our disposal, and figuring out ways that they can empower themselves and their community, and we can spread all of this together.
No, thank you. Mr. Adrian, same question. That sense of duty, where did it come from for you?
I think not dissimilar to what Gabriela's answer is it's a tie back to the community, right? I mean, you have to feel fortunate for all of the blessings that you've received, and those aren't necessarily material things. Particularly in the Latino community, we have a great support network of family and friends and you know, this this sometimes cruel sense of humor that can lighten things very differently than other cultures have. I mean, there's so many little things here and there about my experience as a Latino is that I feel so lucky, right? And I know there are advantages and disadvantages and all this other kinds of stuff, but I owe something back to my community in total. Because I guess there's a sense of, you initially have the welcoming of the blessing, and then you have the gratitude for it. And boy, I feel grateful for a lot of what I have, not just as a Latino, but as an American and so on and so forth. But then you have this duty to return the favor, to return the service, to return the obligation, right, to the next generation. Family has a lot to do with it, right? A Latino's sense of family, what you do not just for you. It's not a selfish place to be culturally. You can't be selfish. You have to give. I think that's almost a rule. So from that perspective, it doesn't seem at all unusual or unnatural to the place where I can say, oh, my sense of duty comes from X. No, that's just who I am, yeah. Right? The idea of service to community, the idea of helping others, the idea of being there, right? Even for the other. It's just part of my it's part of my identity. So it didn't come from a particular place. It came from everywhere that has put me where I'm at.
No, I think that I very much relate and understand to that. So thank you both for sharing that piece. I want to kind of pivot immediately to just this election, and I think that without the pandemic and without
there's an election going on. Is there?
Oh God! If I'm bringing that news to you, no, no. I think that with that, all of these things you kind of highlighted here are true with or without a pandemic, with or without the world as it exists in 2020. So now addressing some of the issues that we've kind of come up against. Even just personally, I'm a millennial. I feel very connected. I've received all the mailers and I've used them really for the first time, and that scares me in a sense a little bit that I'm having to look for information, because if I feel like a educated, informed voter, then who are we trying to reach? And that isn't necessarily this isn't landing with us as much. And so I think I just want to start by just talking about some of the challenges, perhaps misinformation that this election has presented, and how you worked to kind of combat some of those things.
All of them, all the challenges. Pick one. Staffing challenges, location challenges, logistics challenges.
Yeah, let's do misinformation.
Misinformation is that I was gosh, who asked me? A bunch of people asked me that. What keeps you up at night? Question, right? And it's misinformation keeps me up at night, because they're messing with the heads of my voters. They're messing with the heads of people who normally would, but for the misinformation, would trust their neighbors, who are the people running the system, right? Your next door neighbors are the ones pulling the ballots out of the envelopes and running the machines and doing the hand count audits and verifying the signatures. It might even be you, right? And they're in bipartisan teams, Republicans and Democrats sitting next to each other. And, the misinformation and disinformation gets capitalized on by political animals sometimes, who will accuse elections officials of manipulating systems. And it's like, I can't manipulate this system. I've got every R&D sitting at the opposite ends of the table. It's impossible in the system that we own and that we run. And the fact that people are pushing these false narratives, even from the highest levels of government, is insane to me. And that's what keeps me up at night. And then, right, the plus of the pandemic on top of that, because we are really in a difficult spot, because the misinformation and disinformation flows to that world, right? What do you do when a voter wants to show up at a vote center and they refuse to wear a mask? I've got 60%, 65% of my poll workers are over 60 years old. And this knucklehead wants to show up without a mask. This selfish, I'm not going to devolve into name calling, but It's just crazy. And we have masks. And truth be told, most people will put on a mask. They'll be like, oh, I forgot it. And we're like, here, put it on. So that's what drives me crazy. The misinformation, man, it's rough.
No,
It's
for sure.
rough.
Sure. Gabriella, what are your thoughts?
Same. Same. I think that, even just as a candidate, we have been doing a lot of work to just kind of dispel these and demystify all the misinformation already. And so it's really frustrating because it's more work on us just as a resource to the community. We're having to um, our general rule is if we get the question one time, we know that there's like 12 people who also have that question. So if you get the same question 3 times in like, an hour, that you have to start messaging hard for this. So like, we had to start doing messaging for whether or not you could use a pencil. And it's just like all of these extra additional things that you wouldn't expect. And so making sure that you're providing those resources because then people can then share it. And then the other thing is to really recognize that we're in bubbles. So we are in a political bubble. We eat and breathe just politics. We can recognize politicians from a mile away. We know their history, who's good, who's bad, and the complexity of even that idea. We can talk about LDs and CDs and all of these different things, and we break down these acronyms. But most people aren't. Most people aren't in those bubbles with us. And then also this social media or how people are consuming uh, those that information is also in a bubble. So we need to encourage people to reach out and bust out of there, to reach out to their non-political friends if they are political. I'm always thinking about my sister. She works at the casino. She doesn't care about any of. She doesn't care. She doesn't know who any of these people are. She doesn't know what congressional district she lives in or legislative district. She's learning a little bit of that reluctantly, but it's not interesting to her. She doesn't care. But she does care about all of the same values and is participating for obvious reasons. But she's not as obsessed with it as we are, and so we need to make sure that we're putting this language in plain language um, that is accessible to everyday people in a way that it's not going to bore their pants off.
Right.
So
And so, Gabriela, there's something you mentioned earlier that I kind of want to touch on a little bit more. You mentioned the access piece and access to not only the information but the ballot box. And so, one thing I did want to talk about was a specific instance in which, through this before this election, some voting um, locations were cut specifically on tribal lands. Or on native lands. And so, do you mind talking about that a little bit? What that looked like in your response, and perhaps how there will be how there's kind of that's been mitigated a little bit.
So, in the last election cycle, so about 2 years ago, the Pasquayaki Nation had an early voter, their one and only early voting site cut, and there's a number of different reasons why and different times that it was said why, but ultimately the tribe has asked for it to be reinstated, and they have been fighting for it for about 2 years. And it's become very public why recently, and there have been lawsuits and that sort of thing. And it is very, very much a huge issue. And something that I deeply care about. I have been in contact with the Pasquayaki tribe, doing outreach as a candidate, but also just generally as a voting advocate, and then also to the Tohono Nation, which is the tribe that I'm from. So this is something that is really important because we are on tribal lands. Pima County has a responsibility to our tribal communities to work with the communities and address the needs. And if this is something that is being requested by the Pasquayaki tribe, Pima County has a responsibility It is written in our budgets, it is written in our code, that we need to respond to this in a way that historically it just makes sense. I talk a lot about the voter disenfranchisement for Native peoples. I mean, it started well before even just this year, but in this time of COVID in particular, when we're recognizing, I mean, nationally, we're having this conversation about tribal communities being in particular more vulnerable and susceptible to these types of outbreaks. It only makes sense, and so it's a practical measure at this point. And when we're talking about historically disenfranchised populations, we owe it to those communities whose lands we're on to respond to this in a way that is meaningful for their community. Want to make it clear that the Thanaotham Nation has not been asking for more early voting at this time. During this time of COVID, they kind of want to keep people out. And so it is a tribe by tribe situation. And I think this really speaks to the need for improvement between those tribal relations.
No, I appreciate you making that last point clear there. I think one thing we struggle with when it comes to equity is ensuring that that's met and the needs that's been communicated that need exists or doesn't exist. And so thank you for making that clear. Recorder Fontes, in that same vein, you mentioned some of the reasons in which you decided to run in the first place, and some of those being voter suppression tactics. In what way has that changed to now? And so how have you seen, how have you addressed that directly, the voter suppression that existed that you saw that compelled you to vote, and in what way is that different than when you ran?
Well, I think one of the most easy to explain examples was the 96,000 voter registration forms that we found collecting dust in boxes in the warehouse when I showed up. And the only reason that they were there is because they were state forms without proof of citizenship physically attached to them. Apparently, the prior administration felt like that was necessary. But if you had used a federal form, there was a mandate in the procedures manual that you go straight to the motor vehicle division, which they had access to, and just find the document you need to make those folks full on ballot. Additionally, if they had signed up through the Secretary of State's website at servicearizona.com, that would automatically go back to MVD. But for some reason, if you filled out a state form, you weren't given that same courtesy, which is a blatant violation of procedural due process under the 14th Amendment. Now, it helps that I'm an attorney to recognize something like that. But, I got there, and when I got there, the staff was a little resistant right at the beginning because they had understood that policy was the way to go. And I'm like, no, it's not. And we found tens of thousands of voters that were denied the right to vote for several elections for years, just because of this one policy. And so we reversed the policy, and we said, if you're going to give the courtesy to the Fed voters, and you're going to Fed form voters, and you're going to give the courtesy to the online form voters, why not the state form? How does that make any sense? And how is it legal in the first place? How is it constitutional? So we got sued by LULAC in a friendly lawsuit, and the Secretary of State was on it, Michelle Reagan at the time, and there was some legal wrangling, and that finally ended up getting adopted. My policy ended up getting adopted and then adopted statewide. So that's one form of voter suppression that we kind of dealt with. You're welcome. But there's a lot of other little technical glitches in these systems that, unless you take the time to really dive in and recognize the system and understand the nature of the constitutional right, the fact that you are a custodian, not just of that right, but the promotion of that right? Because the right doesn't belong to the government. I'm the government right now. The right is not mine. The right is yours. I've got to promote that. I've got to make it move against me. I've got to expend resources to preserve your right. And then the way that the mechanism actually works, there's multiple parts to each one of these little bits and pieces. And whether you're talking about voter check-in systems, whether you're talking about ballot access, whether you're talking about polling places, whether you're talking about voter registration. It's a whole complicated stew of these things. Every little bit might have a little piece where you're like, well, that's a problem, but it's only a problem for these voters. So let's not worry about it. It's only a few hundred here, a few thousand there. And in Maricopa County, a few thousand here, a few thousand there. That's nothing. We got 2.6 million voters up here. It's a big deal, right? So, yeah, it was basically, I stepped into a situation where it was voter suppression, but it took the form of death by 1,000 cuts against the voters. Little cut here, little cut there, little cut here, little cut there. And then people wonder, well, how is it that you got, 450,000 new voters in 4 years? And I'm like, because we registered voters, because we took on the burden that we're supposed to take on, because we reached out and told people, hey, you can register to vote. Here's how. Right? So reversing those little bits and pieces takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, particularly where you have institutions that are institutionalized, not unlike what I anticipate. And I hate calling elections, and I won't, but if Gabriela ends up winning her election, she'll be taking over for a 28-year incumbent. I ran against mine and won, and I had to jump in and make all of these changes. And so strap in, Gabriela, because you got to ride. It ain't easy. It ain't easy.
And my stomach's hurting.
But if I'm still up here, which knock on wood, God willing, and the creek don't rise, I'll pitch in. I'll help you out a little.
Either way, you're helping me out. But I hope you're there also.
You got it. You got it.
No, so for the next half of this conversation, I wanted to pivot because there's a few things in planning today that we wanted to make very real. One is that we're having a conversation about the importance of voting just 4 days before the election. And so it's kind of like the procrastinator's guide to voting, knowing that a few deadlines have passed. Even myself, my spouse reminded me on Monday that we needed to take our ballots, and so we went. I vote in Maricopa County. I got the text message over the next 2 days that let me know that my vote had been counted. For me, that sense of like security, that sense of knowing that it went through the process is there thanks to the things that are in place. We're even closer now. A deadline passed on Tuesday, and so if I can get both of you to kind of maybe take this next question on both deadlines that are upcoming and what people should and shouldn't do if they're still planning on voting. And so, of course, the encouragement is that we would like everybody who has access to the ballot to, of course, vote and take part in this. But knowing that some of the things have changed over the last few days and what you can and can't do. So if we can talk about that a little bit. Gabriela, can we start with you?
Sure thing. Well, first of all, you need to make sure that you have your identification with you or whatever you're doing. If you have not voted by mail and are going to an early voting center here in Pima County, it's slightly different depending on the county. And that is really important. So hit up that website, check out what you need before you go. Make sure that you mask up. And if there are questions that you have, do not feel afraid to call the recorder's office. They're very helpful. They're going to help you out as much as possible, especially if you have a special circumstance. So that's really, really important. And then for any of you who are encouraging people to vote, voting is a really emotional thing. We think of it just as a task, but really it has a lot of history. It has a lot of cultural significance. Try to avoid shaming people. Help them access voting and be proud of them for stepping into something that has been historically kept from them. Whatever it is, whatever we're doing, we need to just encourage people to do the best that they can and be as informed as possible. Early voting, early voting, early voting. If you have moved, if you have some concern that you're going to be turned away, go to an early voting site, because on election day you'll have to go to your assigned location, and sometimes you may be turned away. Go early, please go early.
These are all great tips. I'm writing these down and we'll review them all before we end today. Also, we'll post links to some of these things throughout on in the comments section so that folks have the information readily available. Adrian, anything to add to those pro tips from?
Yeah, specifically because this is mostly a Latinx crowd, I'll just say this. No manches. Just go vote, man. It ain't that hard, right? There are some obstacles, yes, but we tend to procrastinate a little bit. I get it, But look, at the end of the day, we can complain and we can whine and we can cry or we can vote. And here's the one thing that's, I think, very interesting about this. I think a lot of people don't realize this. Because one of the things that I understand is always a question is, yeah, but there's so much on the ballot, right? I can't handle the whole thing. And the concept of voting doesn't mean you have to be an expert in every single office, okay? You might have like Gabriela's sister, for example. Let me talk to Gabriela's sister. What's her name?
Elisa.
Elisa. Listen, Elisa, mi amor. Listen real carefully to me, okay? You may not know who your justice of the peace precinct is, whether you're going to vote for this person or that person. You may not understand what the Corporation Commission does. That's cool. I don't either. Just kidding, I do. But you may not, you may not care about the state legislature. You should, but if you don't, that shouldn't break your heart. School district, the judges, there's a million judges on there and all this stuff. Understand something, Elisa. And this, Elisa's a stand-in for everybody else out there, your procrastinators. Danny, I want to be real clear. Okay.
I'm procrastinating.
There's a lot of people that make a lot of decisions based on who votes. But they don't make that many decisions based on who they vote for. Think about this. Nobody knows who you're voting for. Your ballot is anonymous. All they know is that you voted, okay? So let's say, Elisa, you know who you want to vote for county recorder down there south of the Gila River. I have a good guess who you're going to be voting for. Maybe you've made up your mind for United States Senate. And maybe you've made up your mind because you know this judge or you know that judge or something else. Fine. Vote for those candidates. Guess why that's important? And you can leave the rest blank if you want. Nothing wrong with that. Here's why it's important. Because if I'm on a school board, or if I'm in a state legislature, or if I'm in the United States Congress, and I'm looking at a political subdivision that you live in, all I know is that you voted. And by that, I mean that you submitted a ballot for tabulation. You may not have filled out any candidates for anything. Nobody knows that. The fact that you took the time to figure out how to get that ballot in, whether it has any selections, some selections, or all selections, is irrelevant. I, as a person on the school board, county supervisors, congressional delegation, House delegation, I know that that was one more person who cares about what happens in that district. And so I'm going to listen to the people in that district. Let's say there's 15 of you, 20 of you, 2,000 more of you in that little corner of the world who actually cast a ballot. The fact that you cast a ballot means there's that many more citizens who care and who will hold me as a politician accountable if I screw something up. So I'm going to pay attention to that community because that community is paying attention to me. That's what your vote means to the government. It doesn't mean, oh, I like red, I like blue, I like purple, I like green. Who cares? We know what those results are. The real results are the underlying results. What does this precinct want? What does that precinct want? Well, that precinct doesn't vote. So am I going to pay attention to it? Or do those neighborhoods matter to me? Or those over there where all those people are submitting ballots? You see, your vote isn't just for you. And it's not just about your political party. And it's not just about your wins. It's about your community. It's about the people who live next door to you. That's who your vote is for. Your selection on each contest, that's totally up to you. So Elisa, I know you don't understand all of these campaigns and all of the offices and all the judges and all that stuff. I get it. I totally get that. But if you don't vote just because you're using that as an excuse, then you're also ignoring your next door neighbor. And you're bringing your community down just a smidge because you're not boosting it by submitting that ballot. That's why it's important for you to vote. The vote's not about you. The vote's not about who wins and loses. The vote is about your community gaining influence in the political sphere, those worlds that Gabriela was talking about. That's why your vote is important. And I don't know that anybody explains it that way, because that's what's real to politicians. And they're the ones that are running things. So let them know who needs to be in charge and which communities need to be paid attention to.
No, I will say people don't explain it that way. And people also, I mean, I feel like a lot of those, that could be exchanged with the reason you wear a mask. A lot of those main points there. I mean, you know, the community aspect. And so, no, thank you for that. Elisa, please.
Called out.
You take all this to heart. We're here.
Tell her not to take that personally. I did not mean that personally.
What she always does, and I think this is actually brilliant, she looks to somebody who is more knowledgeable, and she'll ask questions, but she always brings me her ballot. She actually came to my house and we had coffee, and you know, we talked about each candidate and what I knew, and she wanted all the cheese man stuff, you know, of course, but you know, we talked about it and she made her own decisions, and you know, some were kind of funny and interesting what she decided, but always look to, you know, the person in your community who is always posting and talking about this stuff and going to political events. They're your resource, and it's going to hype them so much if you reach out. They're nerds. They want to talk about this stuff. Reach out to your friends.
Sure. Yeah, no, definitely. I know many of those nerds are among my closest friends, so no.
And the best political nerds to listen to is your Nana, because she heard it. She knows what's up, and she cares.
Yeah.
And trust me, your Nana's paying attention. All right, your Nana is paying attention. You need to listen to what she says. If you're blessed enough to still have her around, both of mine are, yeah. So listen to your Nana.
So before we end this love letter to Elisa, there's a question that came in, and so this is relatable. So I just want to make sure there's no other points either of you want to add. What would you say to a first-time voter who feels overwhelmed by the length of the presidential election year ballot? So a lot of that was touched on. Is there anything else either you want to add on this segment we'll call Love Letter to Elisa?
Just I recommend looking to organizations that you trust, see who they've endorsed. And so, you know, that could be any of these organizations, or an issue that you're looking towards. People are talking about Prop 208. See who's supporting it. And you're going to need to do a little research, but they have those available. Look at their social media. They've got flyers out.
Yeah, I would say to any first-time voter, whether it's during a presidential cycle or a midterm, you know, the length of the ballot shouldn't intimidate you, because you don't have to vote the whole thing. You should try to learn enough to vote as much as you can, but you don't have any legal obligation to vote the whole thing. If there are some races you're unfamiliar with, it's your vote. It's absolutely your vote. The fact that you're voting is more important than who you vote for. That's where you make your impact. Make a plan and vote, and make a plan, and then figure out what races you're gonna concentrate on if you don't want to do the whole thing. But get your friggin' ballot back to us so we can count it and count you as a member of the community that gives a crap. That's what's important.
I feel I'm being very motivated. I see this Marine Corps, you know.
Yeah, I get excited about it. I'm sorry.
People are super surprised though when you tell them that you can skip a box, and they're like, really? I don't have to? I'm like, no, if you don't want to, you don't have to. And they're blown away by that. They really think that they need to go through each and every one.
A quick story on that, you know, the Superior Court judges, I used to work in the Superior Court, both as a prosecutor and a defense lawyer. I know some of these judges. I studied for the bar exam with a couple of these judges, and without revealing anything about any of them, some of these judges might be really, really good judges, and I just don't think they're good people, or vice versa, like really cool person, but I don't think they're a good judge. Sometimes I just won't vote in those races because I'm like, ugh. So you can make those choices, y'all. You don't have to vote everybody. I'd like to see that happen, but just get the ballot into us. Let's count the ones that you want to learn about. Yeah.
A lot of people are really surprised to hear that judges, we don't vote judges in. Judges are appointed. We vote to keep them in or to kick them out.
And
So
that's true in at least 2 counties in Arizona, but it's not true in many of the smaller outlying counties. Many smaller outlying counties have initial judge elections into office, and they run campaigns. It's only some of the larger counties that have
Merit selection.
merit selection. Yeah.
A great program, but that does only exist for the larger counties, and so diving into why that is, and increasing access to that in that way is a different is a topic that's worth a totally different segment, I think, but no, for sure. I mean, so it's just kind of in this piece of the conversation, for voter info, I know, Gabriela, you mentioned, go to organizations that you trust, the recorder's office, questions about who to vote for, questions of what the issues are, recorder's office, organizations you trust, your neighbors. I know a few have been discussed throughout. Any others here that you'd throw out?
just to clarify, the recorder's office will not tell you how to vote or who to vote for, what you should vote for. That is only if you are having problems and that sort of thing. You would want to look for like-minded organizations if you want help and recommendations for who to vote for. So like if you look to your party will recommend candidates and propositions, and they will have resources for you. But recorder's office is nonpartisan. They will never tell you who to vote for.
That is an important distinction, important piece of clarification. I appreciate that. And so where to actually, in terms of where to actually vote, both up until we mentioned the importance of voting early. And so where to actually vote up until election day, where would one get that information? That would be the recorder's office, correct?
Yeah, in Maricopa County, we have the vanity URL is locations.maricopa.vote. Again, it's going to be county by county. Each of the counties administers their own elections, which is the way Arizona is built. Most states are built that way. I mean, there's 3,144 counties and parishes in the United States, and even some of them are cut into smaller districts. There's 10,000 voting jurisdictions in the U.S. It's a massive. Anyway. For Maricopa County, it's locations.maricopa.vote. Or you can go to beballotready.vote, which will give you some personal information like your address, your party affiliation. It'll give you what your ballot looks like. You can actually go see a picture of your actual ballot, so you can start looking at your choices, so that when you show up to vote, you can do that with more ease. And I think there are a couple of statewide resources that certainly would apply to both counties. Gabriela, I'm sure, knows the recorder website down there. But the Clean Elections Commission has links that are really good. And I think the Secretary of State's office will link back to each of the appropriate counties. But again, this is a county by county part of the process.
Yeah. In Pima, it's pima.gov/vote safe. And again, we're pushing the safety. So keep that in mind, but that you can find locations there and then early voting sites. And of course, if you have additional questions, that if it doesn't fit in your category, or you have some special circumstance like you're overseas, make sure that you're contacting the recorder's office directly and as soon as possible.
Okay, and so last question here in regards to day of election, 2020 election logistics. Day of the election, what tips would you give people who are waiting until next Tuesday to vote? Gabriela, can we start with you?
Yeah, don't wait until, if you can help it. Ballots, polling locations open 6:30 and they close at 7. If you are at a polling location in line at 7 p.m., you will be able to cast your ballot. If you are If you show up out any later than that, you will not be, and you will miss out in the election of the century. And so get out there as early as possible. And if you have any issues on election day and they try to turn you away, insist on a provisional ballot. Make sure that you are aware that you have rights, and make sure that you do everything you can to vote, but the sooner the better. And again, the last minute is 7 o'clock, but try to get there early and social distance, and you got this. You got this.
Yeah, I have yet to hear one decent reason why anybody would wait till election day to vote.
I mean, fair. I will.
And let me be very direct. Let me be very direct about this, okay? Look, this is like, it's like tuning in at 4 o'clock in the afternoon to watch reruns of Marimar, right? On like, you're just asking for drama. You just want to see somebody like fainting or quién sabe qué weirdness happening. Like, why? Why do we have to do this to ourselves all the time? Is it romanticism, sentimentalism? I insist that that's the day. Why? Why worry about it on the last possible day? I don't understand it. Myself personally, I don't understand it. Now, as an elections official, of course we're going to be available for you. Of course we're going to serve you. We're going to do our best to keep you safe and follow CDC and county health guidelines. It's going to be ready to go. Pero pa qué? Like why? Like we've had dozens and dozens of vote centers open, night times and weekends and early voting and all this other kinds of stuff. Like, what are you waiting for? Right? Quiere que le invite. Come on in. There's your invitation. Don't wait. Right? And here's the other thing too. And this is not political. And me about to say this is not political. We know that there are people who are going to challenge a lot of the processes and procedures that happen, and the challenges are all going to come down on election day. And if you care about your vote, all the stuff that's coming in early, they're not going to be able to touch that because it'll already be in our possession. We'll already have processed it. Most of it's already going to be counted. I mean, those ballots, you can't back them out. You just can't. That's it. They're done. Every vote that we already have in the door and processed and counted, that's it. They're done, right? Why wait? Why? I don't get it. I have yet to hear a good explanation.
I think
and I'm not trying to be mean, you guys. I'm not. Look at Danny's laughing because he's like, God, that guy is an old salty ass Marine. Yes.
When I worked at my previous job, first of all, I always enjoyed voting on election day, and somebody who I worked outside of town almost an hour. So my commute, I wasn't ever able to participate in in-person early voting here in Pima County. And so on election day, that was my thing. Like, I wanted to physically be present as an act of defiance because of this historical context of people. And I live in a predominantly white neighborhood. I want to show up and show my neighbors that brown people vote. And so I only had one issue one year where something came up at work because my voting plan included me coming home, picking up my husband and us voting together, and then his birthday sometimes falls on election day, which is really unfortunate. And so we were going to go vote together and then go out to a birthday dinner. And then we started hearing reports of long lines. And we had moved we hadn't moved that recently. I mean, it was like 2 months before, like we were well within the time frame, but there was a glitch in Pima County systems. And so I went after work as planned and waited there for 2 hours as they made the call. And it was the 1 year where I'm just like, I should have done this before work, but it was intentional. It was intentional because I wanted to show up in person to dispel that myth that people who look like me don't vote. And so, of course, we did not have all of the wonderful early voting opportunities that Maricopa has, and which we will have in Pima County in the future, which are typically, they close at around 4 or 5 o'clock. It's not accessible for working people. And so we will have that in the future. But if you're able to participate in that early voting, especially Maricopa's voting centers, which are baller, those are like, oh, you guys don't even know what you guys have in Maricopa County. You need to be hitting that up for real. It's really big deal.
Yeah, I'd argue that my staff has established one of the best voting processes and best election administration systems in the United States of America right now. I'd put my system up against Dean Logan in LA County. Sorry, Dean. Any of them, because we have the flexibility. We're very nimble. We're very agile. But it was the people on the ground. It was the office that I inherited. There's so much talent. They just needed to be let loose, right? To go do your job. Get them some resources. I think Pima County has a very bright future.
We're ready.
I moved here from Philadelphia, and so having voted there and voted here as of recently, it's night and day. And so thank you, Reporter Fontes, for all the work you've done. And so we are at the end of the show, and we end every show with the same 2 questions. And so they're just to end on a lighthearted note. The first one is related to the game Loteria. If you're familiar with Loteria, it's like Mexican bingo, if you will. So this is the question asking both of you to submit a nomination for a new icon. Imagine that All in Education is updating the infamous Loteria card icons and has asked you to submit a suggestion for consideration. Who or what cultural icon would you suggest and why? So this is for replacing La Sirena, replacing El Sol, replacing El Borracho.
Well, we got to replace one?
Replace one, yes.
Oh, that's no fun.
With a cultural icon, say we're updating it. This is hypothetical, Adrian. This is not actually happening.
I love how offended he is. Like, how dare you? We're changing Loteria forever?
That's crazy. I still drink Herradura. Come on, man. I'm old school.
It is old school.
That is old school. I would replace El Catrín with La Gaga, because she's got that meat suit that she wore. Lady Gaga. Put the accent on the second one. La Gaga. Because El Catrín was all about fashion and style, right? And today, everybody's like, not everybody, but like the understated fashion doesn't really exist anymore. Like it's so much like out, even like when someone's wearing a vest, it's like too much. Maybe I'm just old fashioned. Okay. But Catherine's got to go. That guy, he's been, yeah.
So you're nominating one to be replaced. Okay. No, I love that. Gabriela, do you have a nomination for a cultural icon?
I think there's like isn't there one that's like El Indio on there?
Oh God.
Yeah, right? I'm like trying to think, I'm like, yeah, we got a lot of problematic ones. I was playing with my family last Thanksgiving, and I'm just all.
That'll be the next one. This discussion for this. I'll invite you back. The problematic pieces of Loteria. And Adrian, if you want to, you have strong feelings. No. So
I'll tell you what. It is a very interesting game when you get like the whole deck and you put it out and you're just like, what?
Yeah.
But wouldn't you like replace like the pot? Like what is the el barril or something like that? That's kind of like boring ones.
Yeah.
I think the controversial ones, to be honest, and that I don't mean any offense, but I think the controversial ones striking up these kinds of conversations have a little bit more value than like,
no.
El Soldado.
No, not at all. Not at all. Because then I'm sitting there as this, like, first of all, my family, like my sister Elisa, all of them, they're like, Gabby and her voting. They'll say things like that, like, by the way, you guys, did you register to vote? And they'll tease, like they tease me about it. And so we're playing Loteria, and then I get like El Indio, and I'm like, damn it, because they think it's just like, they're like,
no, Danny, you know what you should do? You should replace El Indio with La Registradora and use that logo of Gabby
That's
on the
it.
little,
That's it. That is
on the
it.
little
No.
scooter.
Yeah, I love it.
That one.
Honestly, yes, yes. There you go. That is where we.
Love it.
Right? Why not?
That's great. That's a last question.
I'll allow it.
Last last question, and then we're gonna end here. Is another Latinx cultural element, la chancla. La chancla was a disciplinary tool that is still used today.
Was? What do you mean? Past tense was.
I'm trying to use the right words here.
I'm getting like PTSD all of a sudden, man. Go easy on me, Danny.
So consider how you feel today, right here, right now. If you could cancel anything or throw la chancla at something, an entity, a person, whatever it is, what do you want to throw the chancla at right here, right now? What would it be? Some people have said coronavirus. Some people have said, the heat. The heat's not so much as oppressive today as it's been. So, Gabriela, we'll start with you. What would you throw the chancla at?
I know this is 501c3, but we got two presidential candidates. One of them that supports the expansion of early voting and vote by mail, and one that doesn't. So the one that doesn't, give me that changla.
Okay. You have it. No, I love it. Adrian, what about you?
Adam Sandler movies. They're a friggin' disgrace, all of them. Adam Sandler's movies get the chancla, not his songs, right? Because his parody songs are great, but all the movies we can do without.
His new one, it looks awful. It looks so bad. I'm like, why are you still making movies?
Didn't even know. Forget about it. Didn't even know.
No.
You know who I'd like to throw the chancla at? I'd like to throw the chancla at people who don't watch Ancient Aliens, because that show is amazing. I love that stuff.
Never heard of it. I'll check it out.
What?
I know.
I'm totally kidding.
Oh, is that? Did you just make that up?
No, it's a real show.
Oh, okay. I was like,
But you never watched Ancient Aliens?
No, I haven't.
What?
I'll look it up. Don't throw it at me. I'm just saying that.
You know what else? You know what else I would throw the chancla at? You got me started now. And it's gonna be chanclazos all around. No, Danny doesn't get the chancla. You know who gets the chancla? Is young Latinos who don't bother to go watch stuff like Cantinflas and some of these other iconic, like really important cultural parts of our past. Understanding that there is context, understanding that there are some real problems with some of the ways that the comedy was presented. But I think you lose a lot. You lose a lot of reference, right? It's like somebody telling me, I've never watched any Star Wars movies. Really? Yeah. Like, I've never read any Harry Potter. Really? It's part of the culture. And it's not all perfect. And it's not all beautiful. And it's not all politically correct. It can't be. We're humans. We're flawed. So I really think that a lot of, Latino men and women who don't go look back, who are only looking forward, they're doing themselves and everybody else a disservice. We have a very, very rich culture. And it's kind of a mess. It's like menudo, right? It don't smell great when you're cooking it, but later, it's satisfying.
I'm with you there. I feel like this turned into like a therapy session that I very much am benefiting from. So
throw the chancla at anybody who doesn't eat menudo. That's a thing. Gross, right? What? Right?
Yes. For sure.
Yeah. Adrian, or you want to get real specific? People who eat menudo with flour tortillas.
Oh.
You know there are people that do that? And it's okay. Pan tostado.
Nobody I associate with. I wouldn't know that.
A little like pan torcido with some butter, toasted, that's fine. Corn tortillas is fine. Throw some like flour gorditas on your menudo. What the hell? What's going on here? Why, Danny? Why do people do this, Danny?
I'm not here to answer all the questions, but no, Que Sepas, episode 6. Adrian and Gabriela, thank you all so much for everything you provided today. It's been a lot, but it's all been wonderful. If you have, for folks who are watching now or watching later, please put your questions in the comments. We'll be happy to address those and field those appropriately. Thank you again for joining us. Until next time.
Thank you, Danny.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Bye-bye.